Hi friends, I'm going to sing for you There's a Hole in the Bucket. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, there's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, a hole. Mend the hole in the bucket, dear Georgie, mend the hole in the bucket, dear Georgie, mend the hole. With what shall I mend it, dear Liza, with what shall I mend it, dear Liza, with what? With a straw, dear Georgie, with a straw, dear Georgie, with a straw. The straw is too long, dear Liza, the straw is too long, dear Liza, too long. Then cut it, dear Georgie, then cut it, dear Georgie, cut it. With what shall I cut it, dear Liza, with what shall I cut it, dear Liza, with what? With a knife, dear Georgie, with a knife, dear Georgie, with a knife. The knife is too blunt, dear Liza, the knife is too blunt, dear Liza, too blunt. Wet the knife then, dear Georgie, wet the knife then, dear Georgie, wet it. With what shall I wet it, dear Liza, with what shall I wet it, dear Liza, with what? With a stone, dear Georgie, with a stone, dear Georgie, a stone. The stone is too dry, dear Liza, the stone is too dry, dear Liza, too dry. Wet the stone then, dear Georgie, wet the stone then, dear Georgie, wet it. With what shall I wet it, dear Liza, with what shall I wet it, dear Liza, with what? With the water, dear Georgie, with the water, dear Georgie, the water. In what shall I get it, dear Liza, in what shall I get it, dear Liza, in what? In the bucket, dear Georgie, in the bucket, dear Georgie, the bucket. But there's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, there's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, a hole. The end.